So I'll start with something like this. This is actually a giant vacuum cleaner set up in Connaught Place in 2010, right before the Commonwealth Games, with permission of Municipal Corporation of Delhi. An Italian company managed to secure this permission, and main seller was that this is going to suck up pollution in Connaught Place. Okay, this is not truly looking at the dynamics of air pollution, and it's not, Connaught Place is not a dome where you put an air filter and it sucks up pollution. It's a very dynamic area. Just look at the truck that passes through. I don't think this is enough to do anything. And it costs 2.5 crores. When we launched a small campaign, not just a cartoon of this. If we could actually suck up pollution by putting up filters in the air, in an open air situation, and we really don't need to worry about anything else. Anyway, a week later, MCD took the permission off, and they had to take that box away, and they never talked about it again. So these things happen if the policymakers, whether the Municipal Corporation of Delhi or anybody else, they don't have an idea of how pollution works. Okay, if it's not a box. So that's the whole idea. And we really, you will be very surprised how much they really don't understand just the basics of how this whole process happens. So we have a new portal called indiaairquality.info. The main target audience is public and also public bodies, so that they have an idea of where the information is coming from, what kind of information is coming from different sources, and what do you need in order to make a good policy judgment. Okay, there are lots of details in there. One of the things that we're nowadays focusing on is to also tell each district what will be the air pollution in the next 3 days. So I'm not just telling you this is the pollution today or what we have measured yesterday or day before yesterday, but also telling the next 3 days, forecasting it. And a lot of different products are online, and we have vetted information from almost all the sources that you can think of, both anthropogenic sources, non-anthropogenic sources. I'll give you a quick flavor of these things. And looking at all the pollutants, not just the particulate pollution, which is our primary discussant in most of the times, both in media and policy circles, but looking at all the criteria pollutants that have a direct impact on our health. And each of these sources have a very strong signature that can be tracked to different sectors. So one pollutant, this particulate matter, it's a mixed bag. It's not easy to pinpoint saying all my particulate pollution is coming from transport, or all my pollution is coming from power plants or brick kilns or cooking. It's a mixed bag, and it's a very complex pollutant, because it has both primary contributions and also secondary contributions. Like sulfur dioxide becomes sulfates and becomes particulate matter. Same thing with NOx becomes nitrates and becomes particulate matter. So it's a mixed bag. But there are other pollutants which give us a better sense of where they could be coming from. Sulfur dioxide has a very strong signature to power plants, all the coal that's burned. So you can actually see quick plumes coming out of, plumes at all the different power plants, both coastal power plants and also the inland power plant. Chhattisgarh is actually a hotbed for it. You go to other pollutants like NOx, so you end up seeing very strong signatures along the roads, highways. So this is a very, looking at a macro level at India scale, at a very fine, not a fine resolution to look at the urban areas, but you can quickly see the highlight, the other areas. So now CO, again, it has a strong linkage to both your power plants, transport sector, cooking and heating. But nowadays, a new source for the season is the heating itself, the open fires. So this is a satellite image retrieval for all the open fires that are happening in Punjab and Haryana 2 days ago. So we can see the hotspots which are really increasing. And overlay this with the wind pattern that we are seeing nowadays. Most of this is northwesterly winds coming from Punjab and Haryana, picking up these emissions and flowing down towards the Delhi area. So we estimate about 10% of this pollution for PM 2.5 can be attributed to open fires. And this is the low season. Give it a couple of more weeks, this band of Indo-Gangetic area, this is going to light up even more, given what we have seen in 2012, 2013, and 2014, and 2015. So this is going to change. And this red band is going to maybe going up to like 30-40%. So while we are forecasting a number saying the pollution in this district is going to be so much, but we are also trying to understand how much of that pollution coming from different, what source, power plants, industries, cooking and heating. And a lot of these details of how we are documenting each of these are readily available on the site. So everything is in the public domain, even the results that we are forecasting there. It's a public product. If somebody wants to scrape off and use it, they can easily do so. And each of these sectors have a lot more details. I'm just showing you one graph and saying, oh, we're doing this. But there are a lot more details in each of these sectors. And I will focus on two of these, power plants and brick kilns, and how detailed the kind of information available from both in the public bodies and then the kind of surveys that we have done to document the contributions of these. For the coal-fired power plants, we released two reports, one in 2013 and one in 2014. The 2013, and the reason for targeting the coal-fired thermal power plants was something like this. So we do have ambient monitoring stations. Most of these are in the cities. And if you look at the sulfur dioxide signature from these stations, and all the cities, these numbers are very, very low. Okay? The reason being, in the cities, we took care of this pollutant, SO2, by reducing the sulfur content in the diesel that we use in the cities. And it's really at the lowest levels that we have seen. And in 2020, it's going to be even more lower. So we're going to have a ultra-low sulfur fuel coming into the cities. Instead of targeting 100 million vehicles, I mean, even vehicles have to be targeted as well, but targeting 100 points is a lot more easier than targeting 100 million vehicles, and it's easy to make them accountable for it. Technology is not an issue anymore. So but we don't do a flue gas desulfurization unit at the power plants, even though the environment impact assessments require you to allocate land for it. Okay, so we have companies like BHEL manufacture low NOx boilers and export them, but they don't get used in the power plants that are being commissioned in India. Okay, so the entire justification for that is we don't have a regulation to control SO2 or NOx emissions, so we have only a regulation for PM 2.5. So this was in 2013. And there was also a loophole with the PM 2.5 norm that was in effect till last year, is that if a boiler size is under 210 megawatts, you can emit this much, which is a higher number, compared to a boiler which is 500 megawatts. So you have this standard. So you have power plants operating 200 megawatt units, lot more than the 500 megawatt unit. So in 2014, that separation was closed. Then since 2014, all the power plants that came online, now they're all either 500 megawatts or even now 600 megawatts, and now they're looking at most of them coming online now at 800 megawatts. So that bifurcated loophole led to operations of a lower quality boiler. So in 2012, 70% of the boilers in operation were 210 megawatts or less. So these kind of loopholes needed to be addressed. And then the environmental impact assessment procedures themselves. So if you want to put up a power plant, you just needed to do an evaluation for a 10-kilometer radius and a more stringent one for about 50-kilometer radius. That's not enough. So you have stacks of 275 meters coming up where the pollution can disperse up to 200, 300 kilometers away from the source. So you're not able to capture the true impact of a power plant. So these things need to be addressed. So very simple messages were put together, and then they actually took note of that. And we did a similar analysis for all the power plants which were coming or expected to come online by 2030. And anyway, so in April 2015, a draft set of proposals were introduced, and they were ratified by PM Modi in December 2015, right after the COP. So these norms are now in other countries, and all the coal-fired power plants are now expected to reach or adhere to them by end of 2017.
So this is also retroactive for existing plants?
Retroactive for existing as well. So now they are lobbying for extended time period and things like that. It's a give and take ball game that's going on. But the fact that a new standard has been introduced and there is a lobby to get it implemented by end of 2017, it's a big step. And then now we want to see how that was changing. So now we are in the process of trying to explain if these things do come online, by default, even if you do the lowest of the flue gas desulfurization units and retrofit the boilers for low NOx, we have a 50% drop. I mean, this is the default drop that we are going to see at the end of 2017 if all the power plants go this way. And so it's not just about the coal, but we have to start looking at the other fuel use in the power generation sector. So one is the diesel itself. The diesel power plants are actually now tapering off. They're not commissioning them anymore because we have enough grid-based, especially for the industries, grid-based electricity coming from coal, and also there's a push for the renewables as well. So most of our work is primarily focused on air pollution and not on the energy scenario. So I won't go into that. I mean, we have experts like Rahul and their group looking at those issues. But the diesel itself, it becomes a big factor for one other sector, is the telecoms. And the TRAI's report, it says 40% of the electricity that they use actually from the grid and 60% is diesel. That's huge. So even if they take it from grid, this is one sector which can go independent. They can be totally independent of grid electricity or diesel generator sets, and they can go 100% renewable, and you have a completely different picture. And we see this as like more and more of the urban sector is becoming, rural sector is becoming urban, or number of connections increasing in the rural areas. There's a lot of give and take of like whether do we support the rural electrification or do we support the mobile towers. So there are a lot of stories that can be spinned off. But from an air pollution perspective, the power generation and diesel generator sets, and they are a big component that we see in different cities. So if you go to indiaairquality.info, you can see district by district reports, and I put a sample of them here. So yeah, go ahead. X-axis is the days, the coming 3 days, hour by hour. Sorry, I clubbed too many here, but so this is the forecast that was made last night for the next 3 days, and this is hour by hour how that's changing. So this is a 72-hour layout for each of these cities. So Korba is a very interesting place in Chhattisgarh. It has a population density very similar to Delhi. It has a power plant generation capacity of 10 gigawatts. Okay? So there are 4 big power plants which combined they have 10 gigawatt of power generation, and obviously the contribution of the power plants to the district is huge. So close to 50% of the pollution is coming from this. But here's the kicker. If you look at use of LPG or electricity for cooking and heating in different districts from the census, and if you look at Delhi, you have 85% is LPG and electricity usage, and 15% is random. Korba is the other way around. 15% is LPG and electricity, and 85% is biomass, coal, and all the other random stuff. This is in spite of the district generating 10 gigawatts of electricity. So basically they generate, it gets into the grid, and they get the pollution. So we are trying to highlight some of these inequalities between districts, all from the air pollution perspective, of course. And Patna, again, very high. It's a big city, and Bihar does generate a good amount of, they have a lot of coal reserves, and they have only one big power plant in Bar, just outside Patna, about 150 kilometers away, and they have a small signature of that. So I put this up because it has a story with the brick kilns as well. And then the Ahmedabad has 2 power plants which are operational in the city, and a huge industrial sector which uses diesel.
These are estimates or?
Estimates. So these are estimates. So it's not easy to, hour by hour samples are not available from these places. So it's a combination of measurements that we are seeing both from the ground network, satellite observations, and then on top of that we have a detailed inventory that goes in for each of the sectors that's used to do the apportionment on an hour by hour basis. So this is a model number. There is no way of.
Does the satellite give any information regarding emissions?
Not emission source, but they give you a pollution density.
Pollution density, only smoke they can give, or dust they can give?
They can, so the different satellites give different signatures. So there is one AVHRR, which is an infrared satellite. It tells you how much area is under fire. So these open fires, they can give you a pixel area of 1 square kilometer. So within a 1 square kilometer, it can tell you how much area is under fire. So there are other satellites called MODIS, which gives you land use information. So we can immediately tell that pixel, is it a agricultural land or a water body or an urban area or a forest. So that gives us an idea of what kind of biomass is in that area if that area is under fire. So then it tells us, then there is another satellite which gives us light information. So the urban area is obviously much lit. So it gives you a density of how much power is being drawn into different areas. So depending on the intensity of the light, you can then draw on the power consumption in these areas. No, NASA. So ISRO and Bhuvan, none of them share it on a real-time basis. It's available, but not the layers that we want. So these are NASA satellite databases processed through 2 different universities, University of Maryland and University of Colorado, and we access it from their backends. And it's also openly available on a 24-hour lag or 2 days lag, and we have a tie-up and we get it within 12 hours. But the fact that it has to be an open analysis, so when we are not keeping it for ourselves, whatever we get, we post it as well, and it goes online, and we also use it for analysis like these. And eventually I'll get back to the website and I'll show you a lot more of that.
I want to just observe the y-axis scales are 3:1 on the right side, so it's only as high as 40 for Ahmedabad while crossing 120 for capital.
Yeah. So different areas are obviously at different scales. Yeah. So as Rahul was saying, much of this from the power plants, we're talking about what's going into the air, but we have to worry about what's staying on the ground and how much of that is contributing to different pollution levels. And the ash, so this was one statement from Badarpur power plant, which says, oh, we're using 113% of the ash that we're generating. So it was very odd. I mean, if you're generating ash, you could be using 100%. When you're not importing ash and using it in some form or the other. But then the pond is actually going from your own power plant, right?
Yeah, but on an annual basis, they may be transporting or using.
Yeah, so this means it was a very funny statement that they made. We thought it was very funny. But so anyway, so there is a strong understanding of ash is a problem, both to the soil leaching and different issues. And one sector that we are trying to address, both from an air pollution perspective, is like how much of how many of these bricks are being made, how they're being made, what kind of resources are being used, both from the fuel perspective, and then if we improve the efficiencies in these kilns, what kind of reductions are we expecting, both from the urban air quality perspective and also from a regional air pollution perspective. Much of this work is being done with the Green Knowledge Solutions group here in Delhi, and with due support from Shakti, actually. We have one of the members from the group. So right now, not much of ash is actually used in the brick making industry. It's a very, very small portion. So even though there are norms asking brick kilns to use it more, some of the surveys done by Sameer Maithal's group, GKSPL, there was the brick owners have their own concerns that they can't sell these ash bricks so much, especially to the individual house builders, as much as they want. So there's always a stockpile that's left out. And so we also started looking at where these kilns are, how much are they producing, and how they are producing. Since we are in Delhi, so here's a map. So this is 80 by 80 kilometer area for Delhi, and all these dots are actually mapped out brick kilns. There are 850 of them. So in the late 90s, in the Delhi, they had an ordinance saying all the brick kilns have to move out, and they did. But they literally moved across the border, and this is actually the Delhi border. So you can see, so first come, first serve. So the ones which moved out first, they basically crossed the border first, and then slowly they just moved a little bit further. So if you go out of Ghaziabad, there's a cluster of about 200 brick kilns. And if you go to Rohini area, there's a cluster of about 100 brick kilns. And I mean, this is a box here, but if you go past Gurgaon, Sona area, there are a lot of brick kilns there as well. So they were moved out, but not really cleaned. They were still using the same technology. So we did a quick analysis of like how much of the contribution is coming, especially to the South Delhi area. So you don't have any brick kilns in South Delhi area, but now early October, all the brick kilns are in operation at the moment. And if you add that to the meteorology and everything, so we see 10% of the contribution in South Delhi area can be attributed to pollution coming from these brick kilns. So in the brick manufacturing season, which is now October to March. And this is not a phenomenon restricted to just Delhi, it's across the country. If you go to Chennai, we have again, this is the Greater Chennai border, and they're right outside the border. So within this 40 by 40 kilometers, you have 500 brick kilns. And the kind of fuel changes with the area as well. So when we are surveying this area, they were using not just coal and agricultural waste, agricultural residue, but they were also using bunker fuel because of the port. So ships come in, they're cleaning up, so you get the bunker fuel for cheap. It's basically thick tar sludge. So you can just take out those tanks, or if they're emptying it, take your tank and then fill it up and bring it. And you basically, between the bricks with the agricultural residue, they stuff it, tar in, and then you have a lot of pollution because of that. So the production cycle goes, you have molding, drying, and then the burning. So for air pollution, that burning is the big source. So clamp style, basically packing up everything, and they burn it for like 10-15 days. And that's the most inefficient. And the ones with the kilns and stacks are mostly in the Indo-Gangetic plain. And we exported our technology also to Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nepal. So the entire Indo-Gangetic plain has the same technology running across. And then in the south, we have slightly different, predominantly clamps. So especially if you drive from Mumbai to Pune, you will see a lot of these clamps, clamp style burning happening right now. And if you're going from Bangalore to Chennai, Chennai to Bangalore, you will see all along this clamp style brick making is happening, just piles burning. and the kind of fuel that goes into these kilns it changes from area to area, and again we're looking from a ambient air pollution perspective, but occupational health hazard is also very strong. These guys are breathing much higher concentrations in these areas. And again, Sameer's group has done extensive work on documenting what kind of fuels are being used in different clusters. So in the south, you have predominantly biomass usage, and where access to alternate fuels, they are being used in different areas. In the Indo-Gangetic Plain, majority is basically coal, heavy fuel residues, agricultural waste. A picture from Amritsar, they basically take tar, combine it with agricultural waste and stuff it into the bricks. This is something from Kabul, and it was a very nice piece that was done. It was in Dhaka, using rubber tires as the fuel. And this is not just in Dhaka. If you go to Ludhiana manufactures, we have the largest tire manufacturing industries in Ludhiana. If you go outside Ludhiana, there are about 200 brick kilns. They use leftover tires from these plants and use it for burning purposes. Again, one more from different areas, dust. So, and there are solutions for this. You can, if you're still using these dirty fuels, it can be burnt more efficiently, but the technology has to change. So this hasn't trickled down as much as we want to. So this is where some of the we were taking a lot of emission measurements in different kilns and trying to address this. And even if we change to a next order kiln technology available for brick kilns, we can see a 50 to 50% drop in this. So one place where we are seeing a strong acceptance is in Bihar. The Bihar Pollution Control Board is the work that we've done with Shakti and Shakti Foundation and Green Solutions, trying to address how do we change the kiln technology so that the efficiency goes up at least 50% without affecting the way owners are operating it right now. A simple change in the way they organize the bricks from the normal stacking to a zigzag stacking, so you have 40% drop. So one cluster to the southeast, so these guys have actually come forward, and the Bihar Pollution Control Board is giving them, I think, financial support and technical support in addressing this. So this is only one of the sectors and one of the cities. So we are hoping that more cities will actually come forward. So again, this is only one of the stories that we try to focus more, but there are a lot more stories for all the other sectors as well that we are not going in detail. So the point, so one of the points that we wanted to make is from the air pollution perspective, these two sectors have a very large contribution, but at the same time, a lot of the energy and the resources side of the story is something that which is not told yet. Especially how do we expand the use of ash from the power plants and the brick kilns so that you address both. We have each of these soil pollution have a lot more power plants, but also and a similar soil erosion. The cities that we are now trying to, because most of the brick kilns actually take soil from agricultural lands. I'll stop there. But so how do we address that? I'll be able a combination of I'll take questions and then also have a lot of other resources that I want to show depending on the questions that we get. And that is something that came up in the discussions and led to trying to focus that into these sectors. But if you go to our website, which have been fairly high, which is a bit unusual for October, especially in the Indo-Gangetic Plains, but that is actually changing. So this is the nighttime forecast for today, tomorrow, but that's slowly changing. So what we have actually found is the Western Ghats temperatures have actually dropped significantly now that the Western monsoons have changed, and we are seeing some heating spots coming up in those areas. So for the cooking and heating sector, the inventory that goes into analyzing how much of the contribution from that sector is very dynamic. So it's not just we're saying that northern India temperatures drop in November, December, so let's burn and put a number there for contribution, but it's linked to the temperature profiles. I mean, of course, typically October we would see heating, but this time we are not seeing that. So the inventory that goes into it is very dynamic, and so this is again, temperature and rainfall is also one of the satellite products that we use quite significantly in pretty much all the sectors.
So all the sectors that you showed, are all this forecast based on satellite data, or for some of them you have ground?
Some of them there is a lot of ground-based data is also gone in. For example, in the road transport sector, we did a lot of work with IIT Delhi trying to understand what is the temporal travel behavior. So where are the peaks for passenger transport, where are the peaks for freight transport, trying to understand the usage. So we've done surveys in Delhi, in Rajkot, Vizag, Ludhiana, Udaipur, trying to understand the in-use vehicle mix. So we don't want to blindly go by a number coming from the RTO saying we have 8 million vehicles. Not all vehicles are actually in use. So you need to understand the survival functions of these vehicles. So these surveys allowed us to build that function. Okay. And we are also trying to use many of these online resources. For example, this is the real-time traffic map for Delhi issued by Google.
I'm telling more on the point that pollution measurement, which is not based on satellite image. That part.
So pollution measurements also, we do use that where available, but that is very, very limited at the moment. So if you look at Delhi, the Delhi Pollution Control Board has 6 units, and 2 of them are not even measuring PM 2.5. So in effect, you have 4 points for Delhi, which is not a good representation, but we still use it because it is some number to give a understanding of on the ground what's happening. Now these we are also distributing our information to these networks which are operating low-cost monitors. So I think especially in Delhi, the groups like India Spend, India Open Data, and Ayurveda, so they are also operating their own units. So these are not calibrated units yet, but we are keeping track of those numbers and then using them for calibration purposes. So you have to keep in mind that measurements can give you one value only. How much is the pollution? But that will not give you a signature to track it to different sectors. And when we're talking to policymakers, that is actually the most important question. So they can get that 100 units pollution number from the Central Pollution Control Board, but they can't take a case saying, okay, which one should I address first? By default, everybody attacks transport. Because
there was an interesting study by ISA, if you are aware of that, which did the study for Delhi and Kolkata,
yeah.
two cities. And they found that transport only has 10 to 15%. The
yeah.
bigger, the bigger thing is the construction
dust,
pollution,
yeah.
construction pollution, which I think was total 30%.
Yeah.
So they have done a very interesting, but only for 2 cities.
Yeah.
Recent studies they have done.
Yeah. So the same thing, the dust related to resuspension of vehicle movements, resuspension from vehicle movements, and construction dust. So those are also really big part of the inventory that goes in. And again, if vehicles are moving fast, then you have a lot of resuspension. Vehicles are moving slow, then you have lesser resuspension. So that is something that we tie up with the speeds. So here in this Google map, you have this real-time map showing congested areas and non-congested areas. Congested areas means the vehicles are moving at very low speeds, so your resuspension is less. But nighttime, this will be all green, which means that trucks and cars are really going at high speed and loaded conditions, which means you have much higher resuspension. So this nighttime dust resuspension, it goes up, it lingers even in the morning. It takes some time for it to settle down. So you have that peak that goes up till 5 or 6 when the trucks stop, but the pollution doesn't stop because of the resuspension. It actually lingers and tapers off only at 10 or 11. when we see that in the measurements. But then if we have this bottom-up databases feeding that and trying to break it up, then you can start seeing different components coming from these. So long story short, yeah, it's not just the satellite information, but also a lot of the real-time ground measurements as well. So this is a direct, when Google has tie-ups with Airtel, Reliance, all the mobile networks, and they're using mobile signals to come up with, they use that as a proxy and give you a speed indication, congested, not congested. So then we use that as a proxy for speeds and dust.
But that
There are
doesn't
many
mean the
ways.
size of the vehicle though.
It doesn't give you a size of the vehicle.
Or the vintage, meaning trucks versus diesel.
Yeah. So
and
that is the
versus-
background of the analysis that we have to
So you all get
make
data
up.
on Google from that front?
Yeah, you have to pay for it, yeah, but we have to get it.
So other thing I wanted to understand was that, what are the challenges you face in getting data from ISRO? Like, are this satellite data you told us with technical terms, I
Yeah.
don't understand that very well. Other than a land cover one.
Yeah.
Are those not satellites that India has? Because
They have-
ask them to cover those because this is something that they should be doing.
No, they also do that, they definitely do that, but I mean, we found the data coming out of the NASA satellites is free and we don't have to ask for permissions, it's there. So we're basically going with that because it's just easier to access and be done with. And in the hopes that in a year or two, they will take lead and release this and not us. So it's an open platform data, and we are, if they want to host the whole system, we will be happy to transfer it to them. And we are talking to, we want to talk to all the state boards, so right now we are talking to a couple of them. Hopefully they will come forward and take it, and then and others will follow.
Like, what is the advantage of such data which you are forecasting for next 3 days for the public? What kind of message public should take from these data?
Multiple things. One, it's a health alert, saying that okay, tomorrow's pollution is going to be 100 units and it's harmful to you. So you take, if you are in habit of running outside, then you can take measures. Either you shift your time of running to a time period where the pollution levels will be lower. So that's actually in the forecast, you can see that. And you can take measures whether I should be using a mask or should I just stay indoors or stay in office, stay at home and work longer. So these kind of measures. I mean, it's a bucket list at the moment. These are all the things that can be done. But if you look at a few cities in Europe, take Paris for example, if they see an alert coming tomorrow, saying tomorrow is going to be a yellow or a red, and the city actually takes measures so much so that they don't want to get that alert, they don't want that alert to happen. Okay, they actually block off different sections of the city saying please don't travel on these roads because we don't want emissions coming up tomorrow. But that has to follow with alternatives. So when those kind of measures are put in place, that day public transportation is free. You can ride the metro, you can take the bus, it's free. But the city also has the option to carry the personal passengers to a public transportation mode. But we are Delhi is probably Delhi and Bombay are the cities with the highest share of public transportation. But it's not enough to carry the load from a load shift, even for one day. And a good example is the odd even experiment that was done. So it's just introducing 500 buses or 1,000 buses, that's not enough. So what we see is that Delhi needs at least 15,000 buses and we operate 5,000. So when the public transportation system is fully up and about, I think a lot of measures can be addressed. But at the end of the day, it's a health alert system for the public.
Or even did nothing for the pollution. It probably did only something for the traffic.
Yes. There are many reasons for it, but yeah.
You're absolutely right. There are periods when it's not a shortfall, but a management sort of an issue. But this is an interesting sort of question that diesel, so maybe load shedding, scheduling, even load shedding is scheduled and unscheduled. There should be a synergy with urban air pollution maps or predictions so that we can have a better health outcome. Even though the quantum of electricity could be the same, you just time shift it based on.
Yeah.
So how granular can predictions be? In the sense, will I know at an hourly basis how bad and how much does it change hour to hour? Things, I mean, air pollution. If I were to try and advise a load dispatcher who sets the load shedding schedule, can they, using these sorts of tools, get an hourly planning insight?
Yeah. So we have two different portals. One is India.info, which is running at a coarser resolution, where all the products are going out at a district level. So if the district wants granular information, we will be able to provide it. So in case of Delhi, for example, so we do that at a much higher resolution because, for one, we have done a lot more detailed assessments with IIT Delhi in trying to understand how the vehicles are moving in the area on an hour-by-hour basis and what the power, cooking, heating, brick kilns, and all the other sectors as well. So this information is available at a very
This information is available at various points, but it should
Yeah.
be available with the load dispatcher.
yeah.
Maybe state load dispatcher, regional load dispatcher, because right now they are only concentrating whatever power is available, what networks are available, and how to manage that.
Yeah.
They don't build up this pollution and other things. You are talking of something
One level higher. Yeah.
So if the policy maker then should think of.
Yeah. So our goal in the next couple of years is to, when we are breaking the information as much as possible so that we can cater it to as many stakeholders or players
Especially
involved.
state governments.
Yeah.
They should be involved and you should sensitize
Yeah.
state governments so that these things can be involved while they're planning.
That's our primary
Just
goal.
to check, this is a 3-day forecast of the different sources for South Delhi?
For South Delhi area. Yeah. So you can then start following how much is the passenger transport. For Delhi, we do it at a much higher resolution. So we have a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grids and covering all of NCR. So that's 80 by 80 kilometers. And so we're not only trying to understand how much is the contribution to the pollution within the NCR region, because we have a larger domain run also happening, so we can also see what is the contribution coming from outside as well. So that's the only way we can track and put a fingerprint of how much is the contribution from the open fires to the Delhi area, or how much there's a dust storm in April, May. This year we saw a lot more dust events happen than last 2 years. So partly because it's a lot more drier this year, and the wind conditions were a lot more different, and we saw that. So
Where does construction fit in those buckets? Was that urban dust?
in the urban dust.
Is construction, because that's
Yeah.
a.
So again, this is another satellite products we track. This is wind speeds, temperature, precipitation patterns. So it really helps us understand that. We were earlier trying to understand the Chennai pollution has really peaked in the last couple of days. So even though it's a port city, mainly because of that storm that's brewing in the Bay of Bengal, so a lot of pollution is actually getting pushed back onto the land instead of going from land to sea. So these small changes, when you can keep track of it in a forecast model, we can't do it on an annual basis. So it's a sort of interesting. At the end of the day, I'm a geek, but anyway. So there's a lot more interest for us.
So,
But long story short, yeah, so we can go very granular depending on the region and the request. So for Delhi, by default, we made this portal and it runs at a much higher resolution, but we are trying to expand it to more cities.
how much
Yeah,
traffic could you handle? Like if we got a bunch of college students to develop apps for you that people could customize
We
with a
have-
1x1 grid.
We have full bandwidth.
So then you
yeah.
could actually get everyone to get their personalized prediction on
Yeah.
their smartphone.
And then, as I said, all the data is open, so you can just scrape it off here. But if you, one of the groups has asked us to customize the results for them. So we basically, you give us a format, and it can be dumped in that format, and you take it forward and use it in whichever way you want. But on a scale, if you scale up significantly, that comes down as well.
So,
So right now it's a totally scale issue.
one of the interesting questions that policymakers may be interested in, as a researcher I am, how Pareto are some of these sources, meaning within transport or within power plants?
Yeah.
Is it that you've got certain, like you talked about the 210 megawatt
Yeah.
magic number
Yeah.
for segregation of the policy?
Yeah.
Is there some sort of, let's just focus on these 20% of our quote unquote problematic sources. Is how much of that applies to whether it's transport or power plants? Can you sort of share any thoughts on that?
So on a city by city basis, then you can go after the low hanging fruit. One is your waste burning. So here, that's the blue sector. It looks small these days, but depending on the season,
Sure.
it could be as high as like 10-15%.
But
So-
but also like in power plants, a number of people here in the room are also power plant interested.
Yeah.
So is it that certain power plants are disproportional from a national perspective? Or it's very local? Obviously that disproportional translates into some cities
Yeah.
being worse off. You talk of Korba with 10 gigawatts.
Yeah.
Hopefully those are all new cleaner plants. If
Those
you've
are
got
actually
10
old, some of them are old as well. So if you look from the nationally the power sector perspective, you have a disproportionate pollution coming from older power plants using old technology, old boiler sizes, and still using that loophole because they were set up under that regime. And then you have the newer power plants which are a lot more swanky and higher performance ratio, disproportionate. So so we do see sizes and when they were commissioned.
So is that a sufficient demarcation point? I mean, it is possible, you showed a breakdown of the states by, some states have disproportional of the old dirty plants also.
Yes.
So now, what are policy mechanisms to sort of encourage them? How would states react if we say, no, sorry, thou must shut down? Or or do R&M, what you were,
They will immediately say, yes, we can shut down.
paisa de do.
Paisa de do. We have been doing this. In our-
Paisa de rahe?
No. We were just sensitizing to the states to remove all older plants. And they said, okay, no problem, you just provide us the funds. Whether the central government gives us the fund or the state government gives us the funds. Issue is not they don't want to replace it. Issue is the funding.
And, I mean, so would it also cause capacity problems for them? Because even though it's a small percentage, for some states it's a higher
Some state
percentage.
they can't replace the old plants.
It's not only funding, but even suppose if you take Tamil Nadu, I know one power plant, it has lived its life, means,
Yeah.
but
It's
they are not
paid
able, they are not able to close it because there is a deficit already. So until a new plant comes which can replace that, till that they are just trying to extend that life.
Same thing with the Punjab as well. There are 3 power plants that support the load, and all of them are old. Roopnagar, Govindgarh, and there's one more, and Bathinda. All 3 of them, they're old. They're from the 80s and 90s, and they're still running because they don't have any new power plants. And the extra load is actually going from Haryana, the Jhajjar and Hisar power plants, and they are the ones supporting the load. But no new power plants coming up, but the population has almost doubled in the last 30 years.
So I have 2 questions. If you could go back to the hour by, do the source contributions change by the hour?
Yes.
Okay.
That changes as well. Yes.
So basically at noon on a given day, a vehicular contribution is X, not in terms of load, but in terms of concentrations that you're
Yeah.
able to.
That's also
Because you're doing a bottom up.
yeah.
The second question was, you talked about vehicular emissions and how you're using the Google Maps travel times to. This might be a very specific question. I can put this offline. But so it sounds like, I mean, the travel speeds are going to be low when you have higher volumes, and therefore vehicular exhaust. Pollution due to vehicular exhaust is presumably going to be lower because the volume.
Not the exhaust, the resuspension will be
The
lower.
resuspension is going to be lower, but the vehicular exhaust will be higher because the volumes are higher.
Yes.
So there's this.
And they'll be less efficient if they're standstill.
And they're less efficient. So given that you have these two essentially
Going in the opposite direction.
how do you model something like that?
Very specific, yeah.
Yeah, but we can do this later.
It may be a very
It's a
technical
good question,
answer,
yeah.
yeah. So we may.
I'm
go
not
over
exactly sure how
snacks.
that's done.
Yeah.
Not able to explain.
One very interesting information I want to share. And now, Government of India has allowed swapping of code within the state.
Yeah.
So states have now, if having some efficient power plant,
Yes.
so they can shift the code of a inefficient power plant to the efficient power plant.
Yeah.
So if they have got the margin with them to close on some of the megawatt to be generated,
Yeah.
they can easily shift.
That's true.
So I think that will solve a partial problem. for
That's
the
assuming
inefficient
that this availability or swapping was the bottleneck to
Yes.
the dispatch norms.
Right.
But it's not clear that that's the only driver or
But
criteria.
it can be a major driver.
But the problem is, if it is a 210 megawatt, right, and they want to put up 660, the same land cannot be used for 660. Number one. Number two, dismantling of the existing power plant is also not that easy. It takes 3 years. Right, so swapping is good. There is a policy of Government Ministry of Power that if you have a subcritical unit, 110, 210, whatever, and you want to put new supercritical units, the same coal can be shifted. But there is a technical issue about the location of the plant and the area available. So everyone tried, many companies tried, like you talk about Haryana, UP, like Panki.
Yeah.
Panki thermal power plant is one of the oldest, 110 megawatt into 3 unit. But in that area, you cannot put one single 660 power plant. So that is the issue actually.
So it's more a paper ability than a practical, is your assessment?
Because policies are many. If you see, I mean, with our new power minister, he is very, ambitious, and there are a lot of policies, but the practical approach is missing somewhere, the technical part of it. So he talks about, putting all supercriticals, but then you have renewable now. With renewable, you have to have the issue of grid instability. And the whole world, like we give example of Australia, you also talked about. They started all these 40 years back. And today they are, they are enjoying the least pollution and all. And we have just started. So I think we need to take some more time, have the clear roadmap, how plants should be decommissioned and new plants to be added. And there should be a clear balance between renewable and base load plants.
A lot of what is now, I guess.
Do you have any data on water consumption for,
We haven't.
That is not a subject.
and also
But
on-
CSC has done
that.
some studies on that.
Actually, yeah, that report actually talks about water consumption as well. And then Prayas Energy Group in Pune, so they have done a very detailed analysis on water resources.
But even
So
solar
as a
panels
we-
need water,
We primarily focus on
cleaning, yes.
Yeah.
It's a non-zero. I mean, it's not enormous, but it is a constraint in certain geographies.
Sarath, all these activities, you talked about Center for Environment, Science and Environment, Prayas, Shakti and all those. How they are funded to do all these activities? Is there any business behind all these, or
So we
are you
should
doing
ask
charity?
our friends for supporting.
foundation.
No, because everyone is working and they are all working in a different direction.
Yeah.
And we attend all of them and they are not converging anywhere. So who is funding this and what is the business plan for your company what exactly you want to achieve by doing all this?
I personally, I don't have
Apart from serving the nation.
I don't have any business plan. We do purely out of research interest, and we do raise funds from foundations for supporting our ideas.
Okay.
But these are not consulting works. These are not consulting works in any which way. So these are public research products. We want state boards to take ownership of something like this, because it's state board's responsibility to alert public what is the pollution, what kind of harm it does tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or what kind of harm has it done in the past as well. So for us, it's a pure research interest and a public interest product that we put together. And as part of this, we work with many institutions, IITs, IIT Bombay, Delhi, Shukla Pant University in Raipur, many different institutions. We get students to support this work. And so we're not just putting out a number, so we want to be able to defend that number as well.
Mm-hmm.
And hence the surveys and the sampling work that goes on behind it. So when he asked a very technical question on how do we, hour by hour, grid by grid, have an assessment of vehicular emissions, a lot of thought goes behind it. So here you will see a small number, this is the contribution of passenger transport, but there is a good logic that goes behind it. And so we want the state boards to take ownership of logic like that. So why foundation would fund me, that's a big question to them.
Okay. If I could just ask, coming back to power plants, because that's of interest to many folks.
Yeah.
The black lines are the power plants in this graph.
Yeah.
If I look at two different
Power and
days,
generator sets, yeah.
If I look at 2 different days at similar time periods, in some cases you've got a very small contribution in the middle during the dip, while in another day at the similar time frame, or what appears to be similar, it's a much larger. Shouldn't it directly just be a function of, so first thing is you don't know for sure what is the dispatch going to be, so you're assuming certain fraction coal for your projection. Assuming coal is similar, shouldn't the black bars look very similar every day, or is it wind speed?
Wind speed, it's entirely because of the wind speed.
Atmospheric
This concentration, which is like
right, this is the local concentration. So
the emissions would be in the same range, but the concentration will be purely dependent on temperature and the wind speeds.
From the fact, a lot of other factors. So how much variance does that create? So if I'm now coming back to your suggestion, we use these data for load dispatchers. How much stochasticity is there in this? In the sense, power plants fret that they cannot do, even 3 hours ahead. They've got some reasonable wide band of uncertainty for wind speed. So if you're now saying 3 days ahead, how much delta or uncertainty would you say you would also typically have, or does it average out?
So we have a lot more accuracy for the next 24 hours.
Okay.
And that's primarily driven from the meteorological forecasts themselves. And then the second day, third day, the accuracy kind of goes down. But
so how much is that back? Like in wind, government has talked about a 30% prediction range for output that they have to do day-ahead scheduling, for example. Is that a similar sort of numbers from your uncertainty levels? Or?
Since we are doing even in a forecasting,
so day ahead, let's say 24 hours.
this is still considered a long term. So we have some supercomputing systems where you can do forecasts every 3 hours. So if we have a system like that in place, that will really serve directly serve the discoms, saying, okay, the power plant emissions from, so here most of the winds are northwesterly, which means a lot of pollution from the Jharkhand area that will be coming into our domain. But if the winds move more to, say, easterly tomorrow, then we'll start seeing a signature from, in this time frame, then we start seeing signature from the Badalpur, Faridabad, Badalpur is closed, and also from Dadri. So you'll see a small spot that shows up here at some times. So you can predict if the power plant.
Technically, it can be done.
Technically, it can be done in a 3 hour advance notice to tell, okay, Dadri is going to affect Delhi a lot more in the next 3 hours. So they can actually slow down and make not that happen.
So you've now raised 2 points. I mean, one is the economics. You said there needs to be a value placed to the pollution. If I'm an operator, if I just, or brick kiln, I mean, if anyone just spews it out, that's one problem. So the second you're now raising, which is even more interesting, do we have transfer mechanisms? So now you're suggesting Delhi could be paying its neighboring states or having some mechanism to compensate for their backing down.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that that's one way to go ahead? Do other
Well,
countries do anything like that? I mean, this is a
a
new market beyond a carbon
It can
market.
be
It's a
done by
pollution
the-
market.
It can be done by the RLDC, that is the regional.
No, so one mechanism is a centralized control
Yeah.
base. The other would be a more disaggregated
So this was
market
done
mechanism.
in the greater Beijing area, Beijing, Taiwan and Tianjin, the 3 different big satellite cities. It covers an area over 200 by 200 kilometers. So they have done that. So it is very similar to your carbon trading, and you call it emissions trading basically. So you basically say that, okay, this season or these particular hours, if we shift from Taiwan to Tianjin, so what kind of benefits do we get in terms of health? So this is something, it happened more from a study perspective, and we've seen it.
It's very interesting.
But is it viable in the sense carbon? People talk of, $20 a ton, $50, certain price ranges. What are the numbers we're talking about? Do we have to value a life at 1 crore to make it viable, or what's the statistical value of life you would need to?
Yes, people will kill me for that, but anyway. So for this, we actually looked at insurance policies. So how much people buy the insurance, life insurances, we use that as a proxy. So we have an average of about 20 lakhs in India.
SVL.
As a SVL, yeah.
No, but
So it's
based
similar.
on that, is that enough to cause actual signaling to ask, for example,
If-
Delhi to tell the neighbors back down? Is
If-
that
Yeah, if you put money value, I think that's more than enough
It's
to
more than
justify,
enough.
yeah. So, but there's one thing, if we swap electric power generation between power plants, it's possible, theoretically yes. Can it be done on a 3-hour, 6-hour notice? That is also yes. A big if in that is, a big if needed is, they have to be open with the generation capacities, generation loads on an hour-by-hour basis, or minute-by-minute basis in the public domain, so that that kind of decision can happen.
But this decision can
And
happen
and they have to believe in the modeling as well.
not 3 hours in advance. It is done 24 hours in advance, right?
It can be planned.
No, Met
so
modeling can be done on
yeah,
a-
but also the norms of state operations have 8 periods of revamp. So there are 3-hour blocks that they use in the
No, it's
dispatch.
15-minute block
15 minutes.
of 96 blocks.
That's ABT. Yeah.
You have to give the projection that how much megawatt you are going to feed into the grid.
Yeah.
That is done 24 hours in advance. So 3 hours in advance, and again, bringing coal-fired power plant, ramping up, ramping down is again.
Well, one is the technical ramp up, ramp down.
And doesn't-
But you've raised an interesting point, which is there are penalties to deviation from a schedule.
It is.
So just like Paris makes it free to use the public metro on those days, we could socialize or waive deviations that are based on a certain environmental criteria, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting exercise to simulate.
And you have to keep in mind this is it's an intangible product. And you're asking the power plant to not produce or swap based on a intangible product, saying we're going to reduce air pollution because winds are going to be moving from your plant to the city, so reduce it. And we need the plant operators to buy that concept, and it's a long battle, but theoretically it's definitely possible, and it's a great gesture that we use. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarath, for.